Oh, where you don't want to hear this story?
I do want to hear the story. That's the whole thing. I want everyone else to hear it. So what happens if you're groaning during the show?
Oh man, I was doing a little jujitsu this afternoon, trying to sneak in a lunchtime session, and we were practicing some stand-up. And I went to go check my partner's leg as he was stepping in for a throw, a hip toss. And I incidentally caught his knee right in my anterior tib, the fleshy part of the anterior tib. And I tell you, it just shut down my entire lower leg for about 30 seconds. I had to take like a walk it off period. You know what I mean? Sometimes it just hits you right in the button. Yeah. And so ever since then, it's just been pretty tender. So if you guys hear me moaning and groaning, it's, I'm just licking my wounds a little bit, but I'll live. It's fine.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because you've got infinitely more experience with grappling than I do, like literally nothing. And I always feel like I need to be less of a workaholic and more like have more of hobbies, I should say. Between family, work, and working out, it's just like suddenly the day's gone. And I've got, one or two, but everyone, grappling is so in vogue for the last few years. It's like, you gotta get in it. And I've known more people getting into it for over the last 5 years than the previous 15. What always makes me nervous, so tell me if I'm wrong, is I have a weak point in my entire body, and that is my neck. From just motorcycle wrecks and dumb stuff. I mean, my neck, I can throw my neck out and then I'm incapacitated for like a week. And I just have this fear of I'm a beginner, somebody else is a beginner to me. We're going to go 50% and then somebody's got my neck and I'm like, and then it's going to happen once a month forever. Do you think that's founded or unfounded?
I think it's reasonable, man. I mean, the neck definitely sees some action.
It gets yanked on.
Yeah, it can. And I think, honestly, I will say, being 4 or 5 years deep in the jiu-jitsu now, that I think being selective about your training partners is one of the best things you can do for longevity. And I think just having the wherewithal to say, hey, not today, to the 22-year-old world beater who's just looking to sharpen his latest and greatest techniques on you. It's okay to say, hey, you know what? I can't give you what you need in this round. You should go find somebody else. I've got no shame for
I think that's probably a smart longevity call. Is it going to affect your fitness, the strike you took today?
No, it's fine. It's just me being a big baby.
Is there fitness happening for you today? Did it already happen?
No, the jiu-jitsu was enough for today.
Okay.
I actually have a very, very full afternoon as well, so I don't think I'm going to be able to sneak much else in there. But yeah, we had some good rounds today, so I don't feel shortchanged.
I got an old school workout on my docket today that I actually haven't done since 2014. It's been 10 years. And now I'm wrestling 10 years later with my own ego as to whether or not I should try to prescribe it or if I'll get a better dose if I ratchet down a bit. It's this old school workout. You'll probably remember it. 135 on the bar. 3 rounds for time.
Tell me more.
3 rounds for time.
15
hang power cleans, 15 burpees.
Oh, yeah, that's nasty. That's like way faster than you want it to be with that cycle rate on the bar.
Yeah. And I don't know if I can do that. I just don't know if I'm contemplating between 135 and 115. And I think 115 sounds really awful.
There's no good choices with that. I
think I can be a hero no matter what in round 1. And I think when round 1 ends and I get up and I look at the bar and it's 115, I'm going to be like, oh no, like round 2 is going to be just as much of a stinger. So I don't know which way I'm going to go. The warm-up's going to tell the tale.
Hey, I dusted off one of my very favorites. We were talking last week about, hey, maybe I'll just keep the summer of air bike dips and chins going. And I did. So I have been to some degree. So here's what I did yesterday. 20-minute clock on 2-minute intervals. So every 2 minutes, you hear the beep. Max cals in that time. But every 2-minute beep, hop off and do either a set of just one max set of strict dips on the bars or strict pull-ups. So I alternated back and forth between the two. So ride hard for 2 minutes. When you hear the beep, you're off. Crank out a set as many as you can, and whatever time's remaining, you hop back on, try to get some more calories out, continue for 20 minutes. It was great. I did not feel shortchanged after that workout.
Was there just such a rapid declination in the numbers, as you're just getting off the bike so winded as the workout goes
Yeah.
on?
I was pretty happy with my dips. My dips stayed relatively
Oh,
consistent.
nice.
But my pull-ups, man, I identified that I have not been doing enough pull-ups lately. Because my first set I felt great, and there was a very steep decline on the pull-ups. I think that last round I cranked out like 4,
Right.
something like that.
Sounds
So
about
it's
right.
not,
All right. Well, we'll get into the little deal today, which before I start, I'll do the housekeeping, which is go to variednotrandom.com, help us support the show. All kinds of cool cycles for you. First pull up, strict dip, barbell work, 1.5 mile run program, on ramp programs for new people. So check those out. That's at variednotrandom.com. And then the other part is if you're a gym owner, any kind of gym in the world, you've got to do all the back end stuff of billing, gym management, and then of course you'd also like to track the fitness of your members. Be like, look, what we're doing is working. btwb has an all-in-one solution for that. So if you're a gym owner, just go to btwb.com and you can check that out. All right, today's show is just a quick question topic that I heard recently on the interwebs, and it was just basically, are butterfly pull-ups worth the risk? As simple as it is right there. And this simple question, there's a couple things I think laced in there, and I don't know whether this will be a short or a long show.
Oh, dude, I think this onion has a lot of layers to it. And this is one of those questions that I think if you stick around CrossFit scene long enough, you're going to have this question surface over and over and over again, because for whatever reason, this particular movement just stokes the ire of people that that either have a bone to pick with CrossFit in general, or they're kind of like CrossFit curious. They're like, they can see some of the merit of the broader program, but they see some movements like that and they're like, I just can't get there.
It just gets them. Well, I don't know the
yeah.
answer to this question, so I'm curious.
Yeah.
Do you do butterfly pull-ups regularly in your training?
I am a very selective butterfly pull-up person. I like to do it to keep the skill fresh. It's not my preferred method of pull-up.
Okay.
But I do think it's a valuable thing to do in the sense that I like to be able to display skills across a range of different movements and with lots of different equipment, even if I don't use that as my go-to. Okay. I think it's important to be able to have that coordination, be able to pull it out when you need it, etc. But I've never favored the butterfly pull-up. It just has never felt like it was a very at-home technique for me.
Okay.
Even though I understand the utility of it, particularly when you're getting into like a competitive realm, there's no question that the cycle rate is faster. And that I would say it's probably more efficient when you're looking at the output required to do the same amount of reps. I think that it's pretty inarguable to say that for those reasons, it's an obvious choice if you're a competitive athlete.
So do you just pull it out kind of every now and then, or do you pull it out when you're like, done this workout before, I'm feeling froggy today, I'm looking to be quick, this is my go-to?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both.
Stuff.
Honestly, I don't have it as codified in my mind.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's some days it's like, hey, you know what? Let's give it a shot. And other days it's, I'm going to stick to the tried and true kip. And other days it's like, I'm just going to warm up and see how it feels.
Sure. Okay.
And I'll say, actually, I think the last high rep pull-up workout I did, embarrassingly enough, was for the Service Cup that CrossFit ran back in the spring. And it had workout Daniel in it with these big chunks of 50. And I alternated between butterfly pull-ups and kipping pull-ups. And I will say I was very slow, and that workout ate me up. And it was regular sets of kipping pull-ups for the majority of it, but I did try to break out some butterfly in the beginning.
I'm so off track right now, but that's okay because we're having a real conversation. Yeah. This is how I'd ramble if we were sharing a cup of coffee in real life. Have you noticed, or is it just me? Do you think I'm onto something or wrong? That maybe depending upon when you got into CrossFit, back in the quote unquote back in the day, right? Before it kind of existed or was as prevalent as it is now. Everyone did the regular C kip, whatever you want to call it, gymnastic style kip there. But I think I know of plenty of people that get into CrossFit, let's say in the last 5 years, and their go-to kip from the get-go was trying to learn how to butterfly.
Yeah.
Fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. I also think that it depends on the context of your competitive mindedness. I think if you're somebody that has this idea that you need to be competitive every day, or that you're prepping for competition and that's kind of the natural outlet of what you want to do with the fitness that you develop in CrossFit, then I can see that makes sense to me, I suppose. It's more logical that somebody would favor the butterfly earlier. But for the everyday athlete, I don't think it's the first step into using, momentum for gymnastic style movements, which the regular kip, to include the beat swing and the tap swing and all that kind of stuff, that really sets you up for a lot more skill progression, because that body mechanic lends itself well to other movements that you'll experience in CrossFit and beyond. If you want to learn how to string together toes to bar, it's much more similar to that conventional kip that you'll see in the pull-up. Same with the bar muscle up. Same if you want to start getting into more exotic movements like glide kips. I mean, obviously there's different body positions and kind of steps that you'll go through, but the same branch skill is at the root of it. Whereas the butterfly pull-up is kind of a unique beast, and it doesn't necessarily branch into anything else, except for if you really want to be pedantic about it. I've seen.
I was going to say, do you feel like it's kind of a dead end movement or a one trick pony?
I do, but the counter to that, if you're really trying to be like very broad in your view, is that you have some of these other competitive leagues like the Grid League, et cetera, where they will string together arbitrarily some of these other movements. They'll do a butterfly pull-up into a toe to bar, into a bar muscle up.
Okay.
But to me, that's an artificial mashing together of movements that kind of don't make sense. Like the athletes figure it out and they do it, but to me, it's not like a really elegant representation of something that would naturally occur, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
So is the butterfly pull-up worth the risk?
Yeah, depending on the athlete, absolutely. I think yes. And I'm proof of that, right? Like if I didn't do it, then I would probably be sitting on the other side of the fence. But yeah, I mean, I'm just the average athlete who's in it for the longevity game. I bust out the butterfly pull-up on occasion. And, I think it's a valuable skill to keep in the toolbox. However, I will say I also, as per our conversation earlier, I can bang out a bunch of strict pull-ups. I'm confident in my body mechanics. I have generally healthy joints and good positioning. And I've taken the time to develop those over what is now, like a lifetime of physical activity.
Right.
So in that context, I'm like, there's not really a lot of risk.
Well,
if we're talking about somebody.
I was gonna say that's what I was hoping to not trick you into, but have it get you fired up about the question, because the question itself implies that there's an undeniable risk. It's not is there a risk with butterfly pull-ups? It's are butterfly pull-ups worth the risk? There's definitely one there. Am I willing? Is it worth it for me to even try? So I guess I'm kind of curious, is your any agreement or disagreement with even just that like implied risk with the movement?
Well, yes, insofar as I think there's implied risk with any movement when you're interacting with gravity. I mean, and when we're talking, let's base the conversation on like functional movements where you actually have to move your body, move something else. There is going to be probably an intensity and fatigue factor in there. Like, let's assume those elements. If you were going to make the argument that you're just sitting on a stack of weights and pushing the selectorized machine, well, of course, you're going to mitigate a lot of the risk, but you're also going to dampen the effect of that exercise. So, different conversation. But okay, let's assume those things are true. We're dealing with functional movements, and because we're dealing with functional movements, you're interacting with gravity, and that's inherently risky. There's just no way around that. So then the question becomes, how much risk?
Gotten me a couple times.
Yeah, exactly, right? And probably will get you again before it's all said and done, right? So the question becomes, how much risk and for who and at what time, right? And so let's take any movement. How about a handstand, just holding a handstand? Inherently, that can be very risky depending on the context of the individual. If you have a beginner, let's say, who's never been on their hands before, and let's say this beginner also hasn't done much physical activity at all, and let's say this beginner also is, for the sake of this argument, they're overweight significantly. If you have a combination of these factors, it might not be a day one movement for them to be
quite a recipe right there for something bad to go happen.
Yeah, it might not be a great day one movement for them to be kicking up, because the risk in that context is pretty significant. However, let's fast forward. We take that same individual, and from that starting point, they've been training for 2 or 3 years consistently. They've lost a significant amount of weight. They're now way fitter and healthier than they have been in their whole life. The coordination that they've gained from some of these other adjacent movements is significant. Okay,
They're
now
pressing
we've got,
strength.
exactly, now we have a context where it's like, all right, this is exceedingly a different scenario. And the risk involved in that second situation is not even in the same ballpark as the first. It's the same individual,
Right.
along a timeline, but a completely different scenario. And now in that context, I'm like, yeah, I think the risk is worth it. It's time to start progressing.
And you could play that scenario out with athlete from never done anything to newbie to intermediate to advanced to various loadings to doing something slowly
Yeah.
versus quickly, like the whole under fatigue versus fresh, all of that as well.
Yeah.
But why is it, and maybe I'm reading into the question, do you think when they say a butterfly pull-up's worth the risk, they're probably meaning the risk compared to what we're going to call a regular kip, a gymnastic style C kip.
Yeah.
Like there are these two types of pull-ups. I identify this one as risky and this one not as risky, even though they're both pull-ups where I'm going from a lockout of the arm to my chin over the bar. What would be your gut feeling as to why the butterfly pull-up, when compared to the gymnastics or C kip pull-up, is just deemed riskier?
Yeah, I think it has to do with where the athlete receives the bulk of the weight on the descent and that position when you compare the two movements. So for example,
100% in agreement.
yeah, so in the traditional gymnastics kip, when you reach the top of the swing, you're going to push back. And if you're skillful, that arc is going to be under constant tension. So there's never a moment where you hit this rock bottom position and you're taking all of the load at once. It should be distributed throughout the range of that swing.
You're not
And
like
it's
in free fall.
correct if you're doing it well. And if you're doing it well, you're going to be pushing away from the bar to the degree that, again, you're absorbing the majority of that force through that range as the bar is in front of you, meaning you're in this pretty protected position for the shoulder. Conversely, if you take a look at the butterfly pull-up, you're starting to pull yourself through the bar, which basically, if you take a look at it, you're pushing your hands overhead and you're taking all of the load in a much more exposed position. Now, again, if you're skillful, you've refined that movement, you'll be absorbing that load through the cycle of the movement, not all at once in a, kind of bottomed out position. But due to the position of the hands and where you're taking that load, it is inherently a less stable position than the hands in front of the head in a more, kind of conventionally protected position. So context matters. If you have somebody that is not skillful, not very strong, and they have a bottomed out, big stop to the movement where they are in that extended position, hitting that rock bottom and shock loading all of the tissues at once, is like, yeah, that could be pretty risky for that individual. But if they have a strength reserve, meaning, they're comfortable moving their body through space, they have the requisite flexibility to get into this position, and they're not exceeding a fatigue threshold where they're trying to jump into a set of 50 when really they don't even have the skill to do a set of 5,
Right.
that risk window is going to start to decrease rapidly. So,
Yep, I would. You're touching on all the things we said before. If you could, whatever, power snatch, deadlift, back squat with technique that would largely make coaches smile or
yeah,
make them frown significantly. The same can be done with the butterfly pull-up. I do think when you're talking about it, it's a tool in your tool bag. It has a purpose. It's great to have another skill set. It is a challenging technique, with the coordination, accuracy, agility, and balance. Those neurological components are in full demand for sure. And there's wonderful value, as we've said on previous podcasts, as to why you want to challenge yourself neurologically. That's great. And the inherent, risk that's almost undeniable in the question, like the questions posed as there are, that you hit the nail on the head is exactly why. I think it's that when you're at the top of the butterfly, how do you get to the bottom? Quite frankly, and I've, being honest, whether it's in person or on the good old interwebs, there's no shortage of, you just watch somebody get up there, and that that circular motion that you mentioned. Sure, I think that's probably how it's supposed to occur, but another way that it can occur, and it can occur far too frequently, which is they get to the top and it's not so much a circle, it's almost like a free fall straight down to a kabam. Your shoulders take the full force, and then you kickstart the butterfly again, and you get to the top, free fall down. It's not this it's not so much of a beautiful oval as it's kind of like half an oval, fall down, half an oval, fall down. And that repeated over and over again, I can certainly see why that would not be something that most people would want to do for their shoulders in the long run. But like you said, I know plenty of people, one of whom works out of my garage on a regular basis and is not me, that does the butterfly pull-ups all the time, and you can see watching just that it's under control, it's under tension, and that the athlete is in charge of the range of motion the entire time. And there's no like slamming, bottoming out. It is a actual smooth, cyclical deal. And so, again, it's probably not so much the fault of the butterfly pull-up as being risky or not risky. It's largely going to be just the application and the technique implied or used by the athlete, I should say. So,
and
good.
Oh, I was going to say, I think that the other thing that's not spoken about, you kind of touched on it early, is taking your time to develop this technique. There is no rush to be able to rep out a set of whatever with the butterfly pull-up, nor should there be a race to do it. You know what I mean? Like it's not that critical for a beginner to have this even in their top 10 for things that they should be working on. You know what I mean? And so like you've got a long time before this becomes a critical skill that's like on the must-have list. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think there's plenty of meat on the bone for people to be practicing some of these basic positions, basic strict strength like we talked about, bulletproofing themselves to some degree, getting some body awareness before you ever start really pushing that envelope. So that's one. And I'll say this is a hot take, so get ready for this. Maybe we'll clip this one. But I also think that if you're new to this movement, let's say you have taken your time, but you're ready to start progressing, you've done what you should. I think that you do not do yourself any favors by using any grip assistance when you're learning a new technique on the bar. Because in my opinion, that grip is one of the first metrics that you've got that sends little warning signs to your brain and your body that says, I am tired, I need to take a break. And when you artificially have a system to bypass that, I think it encourages you to hang on way longer than your fatigue can maybe be managed. And that's when you start to put yourself in a position where you're like, hey, this set of 5 that I really could have held on to if I was just like raw dog in the bar, turns into a set of 15 because I never really felt that grip fatigue and I can just flail my legs like crazy to eke out another rep. You're like, at that point, you are opening the door for more risk than you may be able to tolerate at that time. So my hot take is like, hey, when you're learning new bar skills, suck it up. Deal with your hands a little bit. And you know what? If you're having super, blisters and calluses and stuff from a couple of practice sets, that's revealing for your technique anyway. You shouldn't be having that happen if your volume is reasonable and you're doing these practice sets. But that's a great indicator to your body that like, hey, I'm fatigued enough that my grip is starting to fail. Come down, let the whole system rest, and go back and try again. So
interesting. I'm going to make the bold assumption that you don't use grips in your training when you're on the bar.
Very rarely. There's every once in a while I'll dabble, but yeah, correct. I don't care to most of the time. I don't have any problem with grips, and I get it. If somebody's really got a lot of training volume and they want to protect their hands, they take a beating just through the normal course of what they're doing through the week, no problem. Just like any other training aid, like a belt or weightlifting shoes or whatever. But when it comes to the point that you're like, I cannot hop up onto the bar without my little safety blanket wrapped around my hands, I think there's a problem developing.
Yep. No, I don't use them either. I've received a couple like free pairs over the course of the years from, very kind people or companies, and I believe they're sitting unwrapped in my garage. I just don't use them. And of course, not to go down the old school thing, but nobody ever used to use them, right? You just take care of your hands.
They weren't available.
They weren't available. You would get accustomed to the work, and through getting accustomed to the work, your tolerance for hanging in the bar increased. The the durability of your hands, skin, whatever the appropriate way to say it, like that, increased as well. And yeah, you get the occasional rip every now and then if you weren't taking care of yourself. But like I think I've said on previous shows, and I'm not talking to competitors where you're doing 75,000 pull-ups, over the course of a week, but regular people that over the course of working out 5 times a week, you're going to hang from a pull-up bar twice out of those, 5 days with a reasonable amount of volume. Most of us, as long as you take decent care of your hands, you should be probably really good to go. Just taking care of your hands and hopping up on the pull-up bar. I had something else where to go. Oh, for me, for the butterfly pull-up, I don't really ever do it in conjunction with my terrible neck that I mentioned at the beginning of, the neck and the shoulders are combined. I don't want to flaunt my knowledge of the body, but they are combined. And, and so anything overhead and to include grabbing the pull-up bar, I have to be conscious of that. And so the butterfly kip, it's just not my friend usually. Yeah. So I just do the old school kip, have for years, treats me really well. I know that I'm a little bit slower on workouts than if I did the butterfly kip, but I don't care. My times are my times. I'm not trying to win a fitness race. And so if I always do the old school kip, then my times are comparable. But I will admit that if I'm feeling good, woke up on the right side of the bed and, the neck's feeling great and the warm, and it's a benchmark workout that I'm like, I feel like today I might be able to do something, whether it's Fran or Jackie or Helen. I wouldn't do it for Cindy, but like Fran, Jackie, or Helen or something like that. I might do the butterfly pull-up, but I bet it only comes out. I bet it only comes out maybe 3 times a year.
Yeah, just to know it's still
maybe once a quarter. It rears its head. But yeah, so that's kind of where I land for that. But it is, I mean, you're intimately more familiar with the competitive landscape than I am. Talk about a tool specific for the job. It's probably pretty safe to say that in most fitness competitions these days, if there's a large set of pull-ups to do and you hop up in the bar and you're not doing the butterfly pull-up, you will not be one of the first ones off the bar.
Yeah, it's very likely. But, I'll also say on the other end of it, and maybe this is just because I'm feeling a little mean from my Charlie horse earlier in the day, a little
Let
spicy.
It out, man.
But I will say that I'm always a little disappointed. And who knows, maybe this is just because I got a bit of a chip on my shoulder. Who knows? Could be. But I'm always a little disappointed when I talk to a high-level competitor, quote unquote, or even somebody who's just like locally very fit, and I have the opportunity to work out with them. And it's like, hey, let's just do this regular kipping style for today, just for fun. Or hey, let's do this workout without grips, just for fun. And they cannot or will not do it. To me, that is a very weird mindset to find yourself in when you are pursuing a style of fitness that, as stated, is all about adaptability and being prepared. It's very strange to me.
What do you mean cannot do it? I understand that will not do it, but cannot do it.
I've talked to lots of people that are so specialized at this point, not lots, a few. I've come across a few people that are so specialized at this point in their butterfly pull-ups that when asked to do a regular kipping pull-up in the course of a workout, just a regular old workout, that they have a hard time with it and will refuse to do it because it will expose them as basically forgetting a basic along the way.
Yep. No, it's funny. Yes. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just think it's disappointing. Like, I'm always a little disappointed when I come across that situation. And I think that, hey, man, you are missing out. I'm not saying you have to full scale adopt that technique, but the fact that you can't just brush it off as needed and be like, oh yeah, for today's training, no problem. That to me is a very strange thing. And I think it's something that if I was a competitive coach, I would want to make sure that I did not develop that in my athletes, because that is a trigger in my mind that somebody's becoming too specialized in one specific aspect of competition that I'm anticipating. And that's a little disappointing in my opinion.
And in the situation that I have in my mind, I can't give you the specific time that it happened. I feel like it was during an old regionals event a while ago, when maybe the specialization was just starting to become like more normal. Yeah. That there was, like, for example, if something starts to degrade or you get fatigued, it's almost like you have different options to, if you have to continue on with the work, what can you do? Point. So it's very rare that somebody is like, I'm going to do the gymnastic style, the C-kip pull-up. And when I hit utter failure, I can always squeak out a few more butterfly. That's not how it works. It doesn't go that way. It goes the other way, generally speaking, is if the butterfly went around and you were looking at the guy in the other lane, you're like, I got to get back up and do these last 5, and I'm on death's doorstep. Most people, if you get just a a drop of fuel left in the tank, it's the old school kip that's going to be there and to get those 5 out. So just to have that knowledge in reserve for that, I know that's a 1 in 100 shot, but I've seen it happen on the competition floor before.
It's true.
And so there is a point to that. And I think we've also seen it, not to go down now the competition road, with like stuff like, you can become a double under specialist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then,
exactly. Same scenario.
Yep, and then anything other than a double under, you can just rock double unders, unbroken set after unbroken set. And if it's, if you switch that up a little bit, all of a sudden it's like you don't know how to jump rope. And so, yeah, but it's probably an interesting. You can see how some people do get pigeonholed, especially if you start to go from regular gym goer at the 5 p.m. class, looking to get fit, looking to expand the margins of my experience as much as possible, into I got a good idea, historically speaking, based on competitions. These are the skills that I need to be really good at, and everything else is kind of a distraction. So, yeah, I can see both. But yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good encapsulation of my thoughts of the butterfly there.
Yeah, me too. I think the risk is always going to be specific to the individual, and you're going to have to ask yourself, is it worth the risk at this time in my training life? And that's going to vary broadly. But if we're just throwing it out there, wide net, is this movement inherently risky? I would say, not more than plenty of other movements that you're going to be exposed to when you start to take the steps to do it correctly. So that's my final thought.
And in closing, as I'll say every now and then, everybody needs more strict pull-ups.
Yeah.
So go ahead and beef those things up, and it'll help everything that you do, no matter what. Well, hopefully that helps shed a little bit of light on that. That was a fun topic. Everybody out there in the community, all of you help drive this show. So go to btwb.com, go to the YouTube channel for btwb. Find this show, and under the comments, your thoughts on the butterfly pull-up. Is there a risk? Is there not a risk compared to other style pull-ups and all that good stuff? What have you seen or experienced? Do you have an idea for a future show or topic? We'd love to hear that. And as always, for Adrian Bosman, I'm Pat Sherwood, and we'll see you next time.